Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Twilight Zone, the best and worst of Season 5. I have watched all of the Season 5 Twilight Zone episodes, which means I have now watched the entire Twilight Zone series, and I thought it would be fun, as always, to give you my top 5 best episodes that you should watch, and also give you the 5 worst episodes that you should avoid unless you're trying to watch every single episode for completionist's sake. It's been a long road, but yes, this will be my last Twilight Zone video, and I'd like to thank everyone who has watched any or all of my Twilight Zone videos, and just let you know that there will be a lot more content coming on this channel very soon, so stay tuned for that. And without anything further to do, I will get right into it, and as always, start with the worst. We'll save the best for last, as they say. So, coming in at number 5 is What's in the Box. Now, I didn't hate this episode. I actually think it's quite a bit better than the other 4 on my list, and I needed a 5th episode, and I thought about it, and this was the one that I liked the least out of the contenders. There were a few good things about this episode, but ultimately I thought the comedy didn't really work that well. It was a little hard sometimes to figure out what mood they were really going for. The characters were very inconsistent. One minute they were getting along, then they were upset with each other. It was kind of strange. Some of it didn't really make a lot of sense. And I think the acting style meshed with the writing style. They didn't really work that well together. And overall, I just think the episode was over the top and not really in a good way. And I'm not really sure that the ending completely worked either. Now we get into the 4 episodes that I really didn't like at all. Starting with the very last episode of the show, The Bewitching Pool. It's a shame that such a classic show went out on this kind of note. Yes, it was the last episode. They used this annoying voiceover for the lead character. It didn't match her voice at all. It just didn't work. The episode's very repetitive, and there's a few scenes where not a lot really happens. There's a key character named Aunt T that I didn't think was handled very well. I just didn't think the characters were very developed to make us care about them at all. The episode had an odd structure, too, with the end at the beginning and all kinds of other strange things, and I think this was a good concept. It just had poor execution. In the number 3 spot from Agnes with Love. This was one of those unfunny comedy Twilight Zone episodes. There have been good comedy episodes in Twilight Zone. This was not one of them. It was not that great of a gimmick to begin with, and it got old very quick. There were a lot of illogical plot points. The lead character was kind of over the top and unbelievable with how naive he was at times. It was just kind of painful in places, and ultimately the worst thing I could say about this episode, it was just kind of pointless. It was just kind of there for no reason. I didn't really get much out of it at all. Number 2 and number 1 were very tough for me. I really couldn't stand either one of these episodes, and I would definitely recommend skipping both of them. But at number 2, I'm going to go with Last Night of a Jockey. This episode had a very annoying lead character who they wanted us to have sympathy for at the end of the episode, but because he pretty much brought all his problems on himself and was just so over the top annoying, it didn't work. There was no sympathy at all. I just wanted it to end. The acting was also very strange, but I think part of the problem might have been the directing. I'm not totally going to blame the acting for this. And the special effects didn't really work. Generally, I give Twilight Zone the benefit of the doubt because I realize it was made in the 60s, but the effects were important to the episode, and I didn't really think they were very convincing. The more I thought about it, the less I liked them. It was just a very poor, obvious script. This was one of those episodes that should have been about 10 minutes long, and they made it a half hour of the same repetition over and over. It was just a very unlikable and very poorly done episode, in my opinion. And you should definitely never watch it. But number 1 ultimately had to be Sounds and Silences, and basically the only difference between this and Last Night of a Jockey is somehow they made the character even more annoying and less likable than in that episode, and to add that, they added an annoying wife who was just as bad, if not worse than the lead character. It was a bad script. A lot of scenes seemed to go on forever. This was another episode. It had 10 to 15 minutes of material, and it was just padded. The dialogue was very unrealistic. The way the lead character talked, I know it was exaggerated for the episode, but nobody talks like that, and it just came across as very annoying. It had a very poor ending, which I'm not even really sure totally made sense. It didn't work for me at all. But the worst thing about this episode and why it's number one over Last Night of a Jockey is that Sounds and Silences is actually quite dull in places. I found myself, if I had been tired, I could have very easily dozed off during this episode, and it's just completely pointless. This whole episode feels like complete filler, like they needed one more episode and they just threw it in. Definitely don't watch Sounds and Silences. It's not very good at all. So now we'll get to the good stuff. I will go to the best episodes, and I'm going to give an honorable mention to an occurrence at Owl Creek Bridge. It actually was pretty close to tied for fifth with me, but because it was an episode that was originally made as a short film and then brought into the Twilight Zone, I felt that it was more fair to put Stopover in a Quiet Town in the number 5 position. I had no other way to break the tie, so I decided that that was a good way to do it. And Stopover in a Quiet Town was a very entertaining episode. It also had unlikable lead characters, but because they were written well and realistically and had good chemistry, they were enjoyable. I always say that's the difference between a good script and a bad script, in my opinion. Here, the unlikable characters worked. I thought the concept of the episode was unique and very good. The camera work was excellent, and the direction as well. There was a good sense of suspense, and because the characters got what was coming to them, the ending was unique and satisfying, even if a bit predictable. But what I really like about Stopover in a Quiet Town is that even after you already know the twist ending, it loses a little bit of impact, but it's still a very enjoyable episode to watch all the way through, which I think is a tribute to the quality of the episode. Now we get to the 4 episodes that I thought were true series classics. Coming in at number 4, Nightmare at 20,000 Feet. Now, some people might have this ranked in the 1 or 2 positions. There were just 3 episodes I liked more, but that's no knock on this great series classic. It has memorable characters. I think everybody remembers William Shatner in this episode that's seen it, and they also remember the creature on the wing of the plane. I don't think anybody forgets those things. It's very suspenseful. It's very well directed by Richard Donner as well, and it's a very unique episode. I don't remember another one like it at all. And the ending really works. It's very thought-provoking and just keeps you in suspense the whole time. Overall, memorable would just be the word I would use for this classic episode. At number 3, The Masks. This episode had very good acting. The whole ensemble was great. I wouldn't pick one standout. I would just say they were all excellent. It's another episode with a unique concept, and I think it's very well written. It has a great message behind it, but it doesn't go over the top. This is the kind of episode that could have been very preachy, which, if you've watched any of my videos, you know I don't really like. But this episode didn't. It was just solid. The characters were all believable. Another case of where unlikable characters, if they're written well, can work. And it's a very thought-provoking, satisfying episode with a classic ending, and I thought the effects in the ending worked really well. And also those masks, those things were really creepy and effective. So The Masks comes in at number 3. At number 2, number 12 looks just like you. I think a little bit of an underrated episode. It does seem to get its due to a point, but I don't really see it listed among the all-time series classics, and I think that's a mistake. This is a very creepy episode with a very strong lead character who's a female character, which there weren't as many strong female leads in Twilight Zone as male, and her sad fate is made all the more impactful because of how well she's written and how relatable and believable she is. This episode has fantastic direction, especially in the last 5 to 10 minutes or so. It's very dark and atmospheric. And I also believe that this episode is very relevant to our times. This is an episode with issues that, no matter how you feel about them, are still discussed and still debated to this day. So that's always a good thing, considering this was made in the mid-'60s. That's pretty unbelievable. This is one of those episodes that's a great example of why Twilight Zone is still watched and revered by so many people. Definitely an absolute must-see. Number 12 looks just like you. But number 1 for Season 5 was a pretty easy choice for me. It's the only episode I gave a perfect 5 out of 5 rating, and that is Living Doll. Now, there's a lot of reasons for this. First of all, it's very well paced and well acted. Another case where every character is believable. I feel like Talkie Tina is one of the most memorable villains in the show's history, but is she totally a villain, or is she somewhat of kind of an anti-hero? I don't know. I guess it depends on how you look at her position as opposed to the male lead character in this episode, but the complexities of it really make it work. It's also a very influential episode. It's been copied by many other TV shows and many films, and in my opinion, this is still the best version of the Doll Gets Vengeance story that I've ever seen, although there have been some decent ones, and it's also just a very entertaining and very well-paced episode. This episode flew by. It was 25 minutes that felt like 15. That's always a good thing, and more than anything, as I always do, the best compliment I can give this episode, besides the fact that it's entirely rewatchable, is that it reminds me of something that could have been a short film, which is a compliment because TV was not what it is now. It didn't have those kind of production values, but I felt Living Doll was of a high enough production quality that it could have worked as a short film. So Living Doll is my number one choice for season 5. Definitely an episode you should watch. So that wraps up the Twilight Zone, the best and worst of season 5, which means that wraps up my Twilight Zone review series. It has been an interesting and enjoyable ride, I have to say, and for better or worse, there is now a review for every single Twilight Zone episode from the original series, which was always my goal, and there will be a lot more content coming on this channel in the very near future. And I really want to thank everyone who has watched any or all of my videos. I really appreciate it, and thank you very much for watching.